Welcome to the Design Dash podcast, your guide to designing a life you love. Join us as we explore the keys to living the life you want without compromise. We're going to start, as we always do, by thanking our wonderful friends at Monogram. Monogram have been longstanding partners for us at Laura U Design Collective, our design firm, and also for us here at Design Dash. And we absolutely love them because they have great products, excellent craftsmanship, and their team is absolutely fabulous. So here at Design Dash, we believe that relationships and community are everything, and so does Monogram, and we thank them so much for sponsoring the podcast.
Thank you, Monogram. And today we're delighted to introduce Carrie Colbert, an entrepreneur who excels at merging creativity with commerce. With nearly 2 decades in the energy industry, she retired at 38 and shifted her focus to supporting female entrepreneurs and breaking down funding barriers. Carrie graduated at the top of her class in petroleum engineering from UT Austin and later received her MBA while working at Hilcorp. And during her time at Hilcorp, the company grew from millions to billions in enterprise value. She then embraced her creative side, building a following of over 85,000 on Instagram, an early influencer. And that led her to invest in female-founded businesses. In 2021, she launched Carrie Capital, a venture capital firm supporting women-led consumer brands. And the first fund closed in 2022, which I was actually a part of as an investor, with 15 million. I did not invest 15 million. I was just a small part of this. 50% oversubscribed and 80% of the investors being women. Outside of her role at Carrie Capital, Carrie serves on the advisory board of the Cockrell School of Engineering, actively supports her church, and serves the homeless community. She's a past client of Laura U Design Collective. Over a decade ago, we worked together 12 years ago, a dozen years, as she told me. She's a good friend of mine. And as I said, I'm an investor in her fund. She's a total badass. And above all, she's a devoted mother to her 2 young children, Elle and Luke. So please welcome Carrie Colbert. Welcome, Carrie.
Oh, Laura, thank you so much for having me. It's just a treat and honor because, I wish I could do an intro for you because I have just as much admiration and respect for all that you've done and accomplished in your life.
Oh, and so we've known each other a long time. I actually,
Yes.
Carrie was just saying, we were working together when I was on bed rest during my pregnancy with my twins. They just turned 12, so this is a long time ago. And I actually designed
We know it's been at least that long, yeah.
I know.
Yes,
and
yes.
we worked together on Elle's nursery. So, and how old is Elle now?
Elle is about to turn 7. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did such a fabulous nursery. And I have to throw in the fact that it was actually featured on Architectural Digest on their Instagram, if you recall.
I appreciate that plug, Carrie. Thank you.
Yes. This is an award-winning, press receiving team here. Yes, they're incredible. And they are my go-to at Laura U. And I'm just so glad that we met all those years ago. And I didn't know you before then. I just was browsing all sorts of portfolios of interior designers and was immediately drawn to the work you do. And so I knew that you were talented, but what I didn't know is, 1, the customer service was incredible as well. But then 2, that I would also gain process. And, you're the type of friend that is just as busy as I am, doing all sorts of business things and personal things. And so we don't necessarily connect, as frequently as I wish, but when we do, we pick up, and I think we just have such mutual respect for one another. So I'm so excited for you and Melissa and what you're doing with Design Dash now, as well as your business.
Oh, great. And I think, we're really aligned in our vision. We're approaching it different ways, but we're very aligned in our vision with Design Dash in supporting women who are creative entrepreneurs. And it sounds like that's really what spurred you to start Carrie Capital. And so I want to start there. So you spent nearly 2 decades in the energy industry before becoming an influencer and then pivoting to focus on empowering female entrepreneurs. So can you talk to us about what prompted this major career shift? And did that bring you out of retirement?
Sure. Yeah, more so than anticipated. But so my early decisions were all very pragmatic in nature. I was from a small town in the Texas Panhandle, first in my family to go to college. And so I knew that education and really achievement were the keys to kind of getting out of those circumstances, kind of above, where I had been before. And so my early decisions were dictated, by practical considerations. So what I studied in college was dictated not by passion, but by where I got the most scholarships. And that was in engineering, specifically petroleum engineering. And then, the best jobs were here in Houston. So that's how I ended up in Houston and made it home. I've been here for 25 years, and I had a great career in the energy industry, but it was never something I was personally passionate about. Now, I learned a lot, and I think so much with young people these days, they're trying to find their passion early on, and I think largely unrealistic in many cases. What's more important is to look at everything as a learning opportunity. And from that career, it was a successful career, so I certainly don't want to dismiss it at all. From the smallest things, you can learn what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. And then eventually you can land in your sweet spot. And I'd like to think that that's where I am now. So great career. Part of that culture, even though the oil and gas industry is very much kind of old school still, I have to give credit where credit is due. Hillcorp, the company I worked at, was very progressive in that it was run in a very entrepreneurial manner. And so part of that entrepreneurial culture was having equity or ownership in the company. And so given that I was there during a time of high growth, that gave me the flexibility to ultimately just step away. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. I just knew that I wanted to be something entrepreneurial in nature, something I could do on my own terms, and something that I was just more passionate about personally. And so, as you mentioned, I just happened to be the week it launched. I like photos, and I like sharing photos. I heard about this new photo sharing app and was able to grow, a decent sized following in the early days when it was easy to grow. And I only mentioned that because it was very fortuitous for what I'm doing now. That's how I started connecting with brands through influencer partners. And I very naively started asking companies I liked, hey, if you're looking for board members or investors or advisors, I'd love to help. And slowly but surely over the next 5 or so years, I basically reinvested what I made in the energy industry into these female-founded consumer brands. And 3 important things during that. One, I realized that I was having great fun, and I certainly wouldn't have used the word fun to describe my previous career. 2, I was having great results. I saw that with a small infusion of capital, these companies were really able to scale their businesses. And then 3, I realized what a great opportunity set there was. That many female-founded businesses, more than I can personally, invest in. And so, I said, hey, very naively, let's start a venture capital fund. That'll be fun. And so here we are, 4 or 5 years later. But the fact of the matter is, female founders still get less than 2% of venture capital dollars in the United States. So those businesses are underfunded, yet study after study shows that female-founded businesses are over-delivering. They deliver higher revenue for every dollar invested. And so given the relationships I have in the space, we kind of have an inside track to, deals in that realm and the opportunity to, in my opinion, make out earns. So while investing in women certainly has a feel good component to it, doing good, empowering women and all that, it also has just a raw let's make money together component to it, right? I think there's an opportunity to make a lot of money as we invest in women. Women know what other women want, and they are products and services to deliver that for women and their family.
So Carrie, I love that you've had a career pivot. So many women in our audience, they're also at that kind of turning point where they want to do something else and maybe something that's just completely different from where they've been before. What kind of advice or tips do you have for women who are maybe like they want to go out on their own, they're entrepreneurs, and they're looking to raise capital?
Oh, that's a great question. There are so many sources of capital outside of, just traditional venture capital. And venture capital isn't right for every business. So I think one lesson I learned as I was fundraising was to find my people. And what do I mean by that? Well, I unfortunately was trying to beat some dead horses, if you will. Like I thought for sure, like, oh, this guy was a colleague of mine in oil and gas for 20 years. I know he's got money. Like, gosh, I really think he should invest. And I couldn't really get him to a no. And I kept pushing the issue. Well, eventually, I realized he just didn't get the value proposition. What really worked for me fundraising wise was when I changed my mindset and realized that the people having to really work hard to convince, those probably aren't your people. But think of the people that are going to resonate with your message and your vision and, just kind of where you're going strategically. And those are your people. So it may not be traditional sources of capital. A lot of our companies have had success with, kind of crowdfunding. So when your own customers can fund your businesses, there's certainly grants and loans available for women in business. But I think, especially in this environment where fundraising is very challenging right now, even for the best of companies, it's incumbent upon us to think outside the box. And really, that's where we had success with Curate Capital. I thought that I would go out to some of my oil and gas buddies who, let's be honest, are mostly in the demographic of old white guys. And not that there's anything wrong with that. We are certainly, love the support of anyone and everyone. But many of them didn't see the potential returns, maybe from a makeup brand or a healthcare brand that was geared towards women. They just didn't get that value proposition. It just wasn't something that resonated with them. It wasn't something they were familiar with. But the tides really turned when I started talking on social media about what I was doing. And you have to understand that the SEC has rules. Manager, I can't explicitly say, hey, I'm raising a fund, come invest in me. That's not really allowed. But what I could do was just talk about our companies, talk about what they were doing. And you know what happened? Women got it right away. Women were like, oh my gosh, where was this product? I needed this when I was having my baby, or I needed this. I was, looking for XYZ, so they understand the pain points, they understand the solutions, and women supported, me in ways I could not have imagined. Women who had been following me for years or women I had never met, they still resonated with the mission. And so I'm proud to say that over 80% of ours are women, which is just unheard of in the venture space. I don't know really what the average is, but I would say most venture capital funds probably have less than 10% of their investors are women. They're mostly men, they're mostly institutional, corporate investors. We really have no corporate investors, no institutional money. We are truly, as cheesy as it sounds, an ecosystem of women supporting women. From the investors who invested with us, our team is pretty much all women. And then we're investing in women who are developing the product and services that other women want. So it really is a symbiotic, circle of women supporting other women. So back to your question about fundraising, I think the point is there are, ways to fund your business. Just think outside the traditional box, I think would be my biggest challenge to throw out there for women looking for funding. There are sources there. You just have to be determined to kind of find that path.
Okay. It's good to hear the community is so important too, because that's what we're all about at Design Dash as well. We start to find that women learn more and they can share more when they're connected to each other. And I think that that's just so cool with what you're doing. I also feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, do you feel like women more so than men maybe feel like there are more barriers, I guess, to raising capital? Or like, do they feel, we've talked to some women like in our mastermind, for example, and they're just really apprehensive about taking out loans or asking for money. And I don't know if that's something that you've experienced as well.
Absolutely. And I think there's a whole lot of kind of macro issues we get around that. One relevant study that comes to mind talked about, I believe it was a Harvard study, don't quote me on that though, but there was a study that talked about how when founders, executives of the company are pitching for venture capital dollars, even the questions that venture capital investors ask are very different versus men. I think in some cases it's also indicative of kind of the mindsets that we have in business. And what I mean by that is that the investors will ask men growth questions like, wow, this idea, how big could it be? How much revenue could you drive? How high could the returns be? Versus with women, the questions they are often asked are more defensive in nature. Well, what if this goes wrong? What if this doesn't work out? What if, someone knocks you off? And so we have to be careful as women that we don't take that mindset, that we're not using kind of a scarcity mindset as we build our business, that we're not being too cautious and apprehensive as we are. Certainly, I like reasonable, prudent growth, and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a responsible manner. But we must allow ourselves to dream a little bit and think, how big could this be? What if it all works out? How wonderful could this be? And so let's not limit ourselves as we're trying to grow.
I love that optimism because as the quote and unquote visionary in my companies, I probably am way too optimistic. But I also like to challenge myself to really think big. Like, how big can I dream? Just so I'm not limiting myself. Because I found when I was younger, I had dreams and I would write them down and I would achieve them really quickly because maybe they just weren't that big. And so I think just thinking about your life, and I may be putting words in your mouth or like making an assumption, but I feel like I'm an ambitious person. You're also an ambitious person and you wear a ton of hats. So entrepreneur, venture capitalist, influencer, and mom. How are you balancing all of these roles? Do you feel like you're balancing? Are you maintaining work-life harmony? Like, how are you doing all of this with two young kids?
Yeah. Well, I'll back up and say for a minute, those optimistic
like,
words were probably they were probably as much targeted at myself because I too, Laura, consider myself a visionary, but I'm also very hard on myself. And I'll say the last 3 or 4 years have been challenging because I think more so than I realized, I have had to be in the weeds, wearing the entrepreneur, building this. It's not like I jumped in as a venture capital, a big established firm. I started this thing from the ground up and I had this vision of what I wanted it to be. And I got to tell you, just a week or two ago, we had a call with one of our investors who I really appreciate because he always kind of brings me a different perspective and challenges me in ways. And he said, Carrie, I got to tell you, your presentation, our annual investor presentation, he said, it was great. He said, but you were a little defensive. He said, and I got to tell you, you got to step back and look at everything you've accomplished. And I was like, I said, well, yeah, the defensiveness maybe is because I take things very seriously. I want people to know that I'm, take the responsibility of managing their money. He's like, yeah, but Carrie, like, you're a badass and you're kicking ass. He said, you back, and he literally gave me an assignment. And my husband, Mark, was on the phone too. He said, I want both of y'all to just go write down every freaking good thing that's happened. Every good thing that's happened, that is happening, and compare lists and celebrate those things because you're hard on yourself. So yes, I've got the vision, but then I can be very critical of, how we're doing and how we're, measuring up to that vision. So my positive words were sincere, but they were also pointed back at me. So I'll start with that. And so then back to your question about balance, I can be hard on myself about that too. I've found a mother is certainly a huge perspective shifter. I didn't become a mother until I was in my 40s. I had 2 surprise babies in my 40s, and they are the biggest blessings certainly ever in so many ways, but in one that it does teach you perspective, right? Like at the end of the day, I've got to turn things off here so that I can go be present with them. I've got to take care of myself so I can be healthy for them. And so, yeah, I don't know about balance. I am grateful, even though as an entrepreneur, as y'all can appreciate, when you're building a business, you work a lot, but it does have the flexibility. I'm not tied to a desk, for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day like I used to be. I think that would have been harder. For instance, I've got to sign off a little early today to go to my daughter's science fair. So I appreciate the flexibility to kind of design a life that works for me, if you will. I usually say curate a life, but since I'm talking to the design podcast here, we will use the word design. But yeah, so I really think of I design a life that, kind of caters to all facets of my being. And I can, again, because I take my responsibilities as a fund manager very seriously, I can go deep down in that. And I have to remind myself, no, it's okay. You got to step away. You got to balance that out. You got to take care of these things too, or else they're all going to suffer eventually. So yeah, certainly a work on figuring out what works for us and, how to juggle it all. I can use some advice from you ladies sometime as well, I'm sure, because you're further down the road than I am, Laura, but I'm learning for sure.
I don't know that I'm further down anything. I feel like I'm starting from scratch. And that resonates with me too. Like I think, and Melissa, we've had these kind of conversations, and I think it's true for all mothers and just any woman that's so busy. It's really hard to find that work-life rhythm. But it sounds like you were intentional when you started Curate Capital about making it, you curated or designed it to work for your lifestyle and having 2 young kids. And you didn't want to be like chained to a desk. So that the way that you built it, and with Mark, I think you work with him quite a bit too. So the way you built it, it sounds like you were intentional about that. Is that true?
It is. But of course, we all know the best laid plans, get kind of knocked over when reality, hits us in the face. And there are times certainly that, work is way more intense than I would like. And then, there are other seasons that balance that out. So, we're learning as we go. But I'm grateful to have a supportive partner. And, we also, I should point out, we don't have family locally. And so that's been one thing that we've really had to be intentional about, is kind of building out our support system. We've got a wonderful nanny, actually several that tag team from time to time. But, when you don't have family, you kind of have to, in some ways, pay for that support system. But we're grateful for the friends, the nannies, the, people in our lives that are like family that jump in to help when we need it. Because as cheesy as it sounds, it certainly does take a village to pull off the logistics of business and kids and activities and, a little bit of social life here and there, and all the things that we all like to do and need to do.
I really admire you for not having a support system. I'm in Houston because my family is really close, and I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And so, especially when they're really little, you need that help. And I'm really grateful that my mom is here. So I'm always just in awe of how people without that support system are able to do that. So you got a lot of stuff going on. I'm kind of going to switch gears here. I have just two questions, and they're not related to anything that we just talked about, but you have so much stuff going on. What do you do to unwind? Like when you do get those moments to yourself, or maybe just with your partner, what are you doing?
I'll start with a funny story that we went out of the country last weekend for a wedding. And I think that was maybe only the second time we've been away from both kids, with no kids. Luke is 3+ now. So yeah, we always have kids with us. And so it was kind of funny because it takes a minute to adjust, right? Like it's a harsh shift. Point out that I had my daughter Elle when I met my husband Mark. So she was already born. So I had her. So we never really had that child-free dating experience, which is fine. It just is reality. And so when he and I were alone together, we're kind of like, okay, what do we do? We're not sure. So we certainly have some work to do on that front. Yeah, the last few years have been heavily weighted towards kid time. So, but unwinding, it sounds cheesy and cliche, but I'm all about a good massage. I'm all about a good spa appointment. But, just other things are a bit more simple than that, working out. It's all the basic stuff that we hear of, but we still, making sure we get enough sleep, all those things. I find that when I'm out of whack, it's because I've been neglecting those basics, right? And, a massage certainly doesn't fix everything, but making sure I'm taking my vitamins and getting sleep and taking care of, my own well-being. It's like, oh, okay, well, I feel like a new woman again, So yeah, just getting back to basics is kind of my, my thing to do when I'm feeling out of whack. Well, I don't do well without sleep.
Oh, I don't either. And I'm trying to learn how to get more of it. I think I'm one of those people that needs like 10 hours plus. And for so long, I've been living on 6. And I think it's finally hitting me now that I'm getting into my 40s.
9 hours. 9 hours is it.
I need, that's my sweet spot.
Yes.
I think another thing that I admire you for, just outside of all the other amazing things that you do, is that you are so stylish. You have the most fabulous wardrobe. And as somebody who loves pattern and color myself, I need to know where you shop. Those dresses are so fantastic.
Oh, goodness. Thank you.
Like, where did you get that? I need to know.
Well, I'll give you a longer answer. And back when Laura and I first met, first I was working a corporate job with no kids, disposable income. And so I would browse, Net-a-Porter, Shopbop, all the things, and buy all the things all the time. My perspective has changed post-pandemic, post-kids, having my own business. It's very different. I find that there are just like a few key brands that I like to support these days. No surprise, they're female-founded brands. Today and most days is Frances Valentine. And I have to tell you a real quick backstory because I think it's a great story of kind of women bonding and building businesses and sharing life together. So the CEO of this company, Frances Valentine, is a lady by the name of Elise. She grew up on a farm in Kansas, went to the University of Kansas, and met her friend, Kate Spade. Well, they dreamed of moving to New York and starting a fashion brand. Well, they did just that. They started Kate Spade together. They scaled it, they sold it, and they thought, oh, this is great. We're never going to have to work a day in our lives. And they took time off to raise their kids. But then they had to itch again. They wanted to get back in the game. So they actually started Frances Valentine together before, unfortunately, Kate passed away. But Elise continues to shepherd the brand and kind of grow it to new heights, as the years have gone on. And actually, she just announced last week that she signed a book, Simon & Schuster, to share the stories of her and Katie's joyful friendship. She gets a little bummed out that all the headlines typically lead with how Kate passed away, unfortunately. But she said she and Katie shared so many moments of joy in their business journey as well as their personal family journeys. And so that should be out next spring, but we're really excited about that. So I'm almost some form of Frances Valentine, or two other brands that I'm excited about and like personally. Hunter Bell is a fashion designer based here in Houston, where we are. And Hunter's kids actually go to school with my daughter, and we've become close friends. But I read her designs. And then there's another up and coming designer who I love to support. Her name is Sarah, and her clothing line is called May. Mae. Sarah is a young girl who started her career at Kate Spade, coincidentally, and I've introduced her to Elise at Frances Valentine, but she is doing a really small batch, kind of made to order clothing. It's called May Designs, I believe. She's actually going to be in Houston tomorrow for a trunk show, but that's a side note. But it's really, vivacious young woman. And when she reached out the first time a few years ago, gosh, I mean, she was maybe only doing 5 figures in revenue at the time, very small. And I her to a business coach and connected her to a few other people. And I can't take too much credit. She's grown leaps and bounds on her own. And it's just been such a joy to watch her grow her business over time.
Well, thanks for those tips. I had to take some notes. I knew that I had to ask the venture capitalist about her favorite brands, especially when it comes to clothing. I knew you'd have a good response there. Okay, now I know. I feel solved.
Okay, I love it. So we know where to go now. And I guess I've just really enjoyed watching you completely pivot. And I'm not surprised that those are the brands you love, because you've always been so into color. And I think that's what drew us together to begin with. But I've loved watching you grow Curate Capital and just seeing you invest in women, because I think that's just so important. I have twin girls, and I know that Elle is watching you, even if she's not, I don't know, maybe she's interacting with you now at her age about how impressive this is. But I would just want to look at my daughters and think, how proud would they be? And so does that come to mind when you're doing this? Are you thinking about Elle?
Yes, indeed. We had a great, kind of sentimental moment for me. It was in this past school year sometime. Elle and I just randomly popped into Target to pick up a birthday present for one of her friends. You know how that goes. There's always a birthday present. And I usually keep some on stock for one of our portfolio companies, but I guess I didn't have any. So we popped into Target on a Friday night. And at the time, a beauty brand that we're invested in called Live Tended had just launched in Target. They're in the Ulta section. And Elle and I walked in. Elle actually spotted it before I did. She said, "Oh, Mom, look, it's Live Tended." And so she wanted to take a picture and buy some lip gloss and all that. But it's funny, she actually keeps pretty close tabs on what we're invested in. And we were leaving her school yesterday, and someone complimented her on her backpack, and she said, it was a mom, and she said, "Isn't that a company that your dad invested in?" Something, and she goes, "No, my mommy invested in that company."
Yeah.
So she's very, very loud and vocal about promoting our companies. Yeah, my mommy invested in that, So we had a little girls' night a week or so ago, and that was her topic of conversation. She goes, "Now, Mommy, tell me, how many companies are we invested in now?" And I said, "Well, we've got 15 now." She goes, "Oh, good." She said, "So-and-so said that their daddy is an investor, but he only has 4 or 5h companies that he's invested in." So she's already developing that kind of ambitious, competitive spirit about her. So yes, indeed.
Oh my God, the apple does not fall far.
Yeah.
Well, so, just to kind of bring our conversation to a close. But before we wrap up, I'd love to know, what's next for you? So you're building your second fund, you're putting that together. And then how do you envision the future of women in venture capital? Like what's the goal for women in venture capital?
Yeah, I know. Obviously, we want to move the needle and get more than 1.9% of funding to women. I mean, I think that's, a kind of macro goal. For us, we're excited to really just do more of the same. And that may, sound vague, but I think we really kind of dipped our toe in the water with our first fund. We were targeting 10 million. We actually raised 15. And so we've invested in 15 companies. We'll be launching our second fund in the fall. And we're not exactly sure of sizing, but it'll be much bigger, probably about 50 million is what we're thinking. So we're just excited to do more of the same because quite frankly, we have so many great deals coming at us. And, not to go too deep down the venture capital rabbit hole, but, venture capital certainly involves a lot of high tech, AI, and, there are all sorts of like kind of deep tech things you can do. And a lot of those kind of traditional venture capital investors eschew consumer brands as not stuff or not exciting enough for them. However, we really don't believe that. I think there's still a lot of money to be made in consumer brands, whether that's consumer products or consumer services. We really believe that women are developing the products and services that I want for themselves and their families. The statistics show that women control over 85% of household spending. And, a perfect example is, this beauty brand that we're invested in, Live Tinted. She's of Indian descent and with a darker skin tone. So rather than, continuing to be frustrated by the lack of ranges of skin tones and or tones for makeup, she just created her own brand. And so women know what's missing, whether that be a good all-natural deodorant, whether that be a makeup company that caters to all skin tones, or getting epidurals easier and less painful. So they're solving a literal pain point for women. So whether it be in consumer brands or some of these other opportunities like a medical device or perhaps fintech or ed tech or something, women are building what we need and want. And so we think there's a lot of money to be made there and a lot of great to be affected in the world.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today. And if our listeners or viewers want to find you, where should they go? Where are you on socials?
Sure. On Instagram, my personal username is just @CarrieC, or follow the Curate account, and that is just @curate.capital. And if you'd like to learn more about venture capital, if you'd like to learn more about investing, if you'd like to be in the know when we announce our second fund, you can just go to our website and on the Invest tab, just click on that and drop your in. We'll keep you in the loop on any developments that we have.
Okay, perfect. So curatecapital.com.
It's actually just curate.capital.
Oh, even easier. Yeah. Curate.capital.
That's the Instagram and the website. You got it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. It was really fun to talk to you.
Thank you, ladies.
Loved it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Carrie.
Same to you.
And thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out our next podcast coming live next week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can find us and more wonderful stories like these on designdash.com. And make sure to follow us at Design Dasher on Instagram and TikTok. Till next time.